If there was one image these past few weeks that eloquently captured how truly Kafkaesque a situation India's marginalized, Muslims in particular, find themselves in, it was this one. This man, Wasim Sheikh, said his shop in Khargone, Madhya Pradesh, was razed by bulldozers on the 11th of April. Sheikh said the administration accused him of being one of those who pelted stones during the violence that broke out on the occasion of Ram Navami. Sheikh, as you can see, is an amputee. Then on Monday, the district administration released a video where Sheikh seemed to recant his earlier statement, only to tell reporters from the Quint and NewsClick later that the district administration had asked him to retract that statement and had promised to help him. This is your weekly fix. I'm Smitha Nair. Here's what's been happening. The Madhya Pradesh administration demolished more than 40 shops and houses, mostly belonging to Muslims in Khargone, a day after violence broke out. These properties belonged to people who the administration suspects were involved in pelting stones on a Hindu procession as it passed through a lane that houses a mosque. I know what you're thinking. Punishment being meted out without as much as an investigation, let alone a trial and conviction. But wait, that isn't the only illegality this move engenders. I'll get to that in a moment. In last week's episode, we talked about the playbook that's now being followed. Hindutva groups led processions that had men brandishing swords and saffron flags, playing provocative songs outside local mosques meant to humiliate and bait. The idea, it appears, was to provoke some kind of response from Muslims who can then be branded rioters and acted against both legally and through these sort of extrajudicial measures such as demolitions. Yesterday, inspired by Madhya Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh, and Gujarat, the BJP controlled North Delhi Municipal Corporation embarked on a demolition drive in Jahangirpuri that saw communal violence on Hanuman Jayanti. The Supreme Court intervened, ordering that the status quo be maintained. Let's speak to Nikita Sonavane. She's lawyer and co-founder of the Criminal Justice and Police Accountability Project. Also with us, Mrinalini Ravindranath. She's a lawyer and also a colleague of Nikita at the Criminal Justice and Police Accountability Project. Thank you to the two of you for making the time to speak to us here at Scroll. Nikita, the district administration in Khargone has claimed that the demolitions were undertaken as per the provisions of the Madhya Pradesh Municipal Corporation rules and state land revenue code. In Delhi, similarly, the actions in Jahangirpuri, the administration says, is merely against encroachments. Can you help our viewers understand if principles of natural justice and due process were indeed followed, and what you make of the explanation that's been provided by the administration in both cases?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Smita, for having us here. I think these are really important questions to be discussed, particularly in light of the alleged legal framework that the district administration seems to be relying on, both in Khargone and in Delhi. I think whether it's the Madhya Pradesh Land Revenue Code or any other law, it's important to understand that the principle of natural justice is at the heart of it, right? So, which means that each time the administration thinks that there is any kind of illegal encroachment, it requires the administration to issue a notice upon the person who's an alleged encroacher, provide them with reasonable opportunity in order to be able to make out a case for themselves and to present their side of the story, none of which has happened here, right? I mean, we've seen this both in Khargone and we've seen this, of course, happen in Delhi yesterday. That no notice was issued, no reasonable opportunity was provided to anybody whose properties were demolished, and I think it's a really blatant violation of the principles of natural justice that underlie all of these laws that are applicable in India. And I would like my colleague Mrinalini also to come in here to add on to this.
Yes,
Yeah,
Mrinalini?
yes, as Nikita was saying, there is a reasonable opportunity to be heard that is at the heart of any proceeding that a local administration person like a tahsildar might undertake before evicting someone. This means that there is a show cause notice to be sent. There is an opportunity for the person to be present, and there are also again a wide range of civil remedies that are still possible before you go in and demolish, right? You can kind of ask a fine to be paid. There are instances where this is also happening, and this is even within the Municipal Corporation Act that we see in Madhya Pradesh. There is a fine that you pay where the offense can be compounded in some way, or you can be asked to pay rent on that land. Even if you have been given time to vacate the land through after you've been shown a show cause notice and you've not given enough reason as to why you're occupying that land, there's still a period that you're given to vacate that land, right? And if you've not even vacated during that time, the Tehsildar can still give you another period to go ahead and vacate if you don't have enough, if you have good reason as to why you've not been able to vacate in that time. Or also, there is an additional fine that can be paid on behalf of that. So it's very clear that demolition is not the first resort at all that the administration has to take, because there is a lot of discretion. And I think the problem is with discretion that we're seeing here, right? That when there are like four different things that you can do, there is only one way in which you want to respond to a situation. And this it just goes to show that this is really not about illegal encroachments as much as it is about punishing and about humiliating, and it is about economically hurting. And actually, when there are like the chief minister in Madhya Pradesh and even the local administration, the district collector, the SDM, and all of them are saying that, sure, this is illegal encroachment, but we will not let criminals go unpunished. We want to hurt them. I think
We
in
want to
last
hurt,
month we,
yeah. 22nd of
yeah,
March is when the
Right.
Chief Minister of Madhya Pradesh went on record to say that all miscreants will be buried to the ground. He has been ominously termed as, it's been termed as Mama's bulldozer.
Right.
Mama being the Chief Minister of Madhya Pradesh. So it's very evidently, I think, the Chief Minister himself has gone on record to say that the purported aim of this is in no way to address the question of quote unquote illegal encroachments, right? This is a crime control mechanism. This is a retributive approach to say that, you want to economically hurt criminals, or those the administration considers to be criminals. So it's a sort of like really blatant, if I may add, bulldozing of criminal procedure and criminal law, and the basic tenets of the rule of law that we are seeing happening in broad daylight. And there is a very clear public sanction, not just from the powers that be, but also there has been a sort of legitimacy for this in the case of Madhya Pradesh, because what has happened in Khargone is by no means an isolated incident. It's a part of a series of incidents that have happened in various parts of Madhya Pradesh that have been undertaken by the district administration. So I think it's part of that sort of mechanism, of controlling crime and controlling criminals. And of course, as Mrinalini mentioned, the discretionary power is also being exercised at the expense of a certain kind of criminals belonging to a certain strata of society. So it's
So,
very
so let me
evidently
ask
that.
you. Let me ask you about that, Nikita. Since you touched upon it,
Yeah,
I read your. In fact, I read your tweet earlier this week where you refer to this sort of public sanction there is for
yeah,
administrations and police that are seen to be tough on law, tough on criminals, and sort of a leeway is given, like a carte blanche. You do what you will, and you will continue to enjoy public support. I wanted you to dwell on that a little more. Is this is obviously this is not anecdotal. I mean, these are things that you study. We've seen this from a survey done in 2018 as well, where 50% of those who surveyed, and it was a big sort of sample size, said that they condone police violence. 34% to of those surveyed said they partially or do not sort of support police violence of any kind, and the rest chose not to answer the question. Now that is a staggering number. Um, and something that we see, in the Andhra Pradesh rape case where you
yeah.
saw the accused was sort of killed in an encounter, there seemed to be like jubilation and celebration across. So why is that? Can you reflect on that a little? Is it because of the fact that our justice system moves so slowly, and the fact that there is 4.5 crores is what the Chief Justice said, backlog of cases across various courts? Is that one of the reasons, or is it because most of these people who are doing the cheering are never at the receiving end of illegal actions of the police or the administration?
I mean, it's mostly the latter, right? I think there has been a sort of cultivated investment in this retributive form of punishment and retributive form of justice that we've invested in, right? I mean, it started by saying, oh, you need to have more stringent criminal laws, then to say, oh, well, why bother with any other form of punishment? We should be sentencing people to death. And then, of course, now to say that, well, why bother with processes at all? Uh, you know, sort of saying that we need to resort to this kind of vigilante form of justice. And I think in various ways, particularly the you know sort of public support or sanction for the police has been at the heart of this, right? Because they are omnipresent, they're in so many ways. The entry point to the system, so to say that if you are going to maintain law and order in society, which means that there have to be excesses that have to be committed, right? I mean, you don't even see these as excesses, you see them as being necessary evils, right? So to say that it's okay if somebody dies in police custody, it just means that if it deters a few others, then what is the harm? It's that sort of cost benefit analysis of human life that is done. And I mean, we all know this from data, we all know this from research, that those who are this sort of collateral damage in the larger quest for maintaining law and order and peace in society are often people who belong to the most oppressed sections of society, right? And those who are overwhelmingly sanctioning this are seldom those, as you mentioned, Smitha, who are at the receiving end of this violence. So I think to say that there are a certain set of people who are falling through this, or who are becoming, who are at the receiving end of this sort of police violence, or saying that there is or there should be this whole approach of saying, oh, spare the rod and spoil the child. I think that sort of approach that there has been sanction for, it's been around for a very long time. And with the Hyderabad case and a bunch of other cases, and I don't think it has anything to do with pendency, because I think even when in cases there has been cases that have received a lot of media traction, and there has been cases that have been in the limelight, and fast track courts have been set up, and the death penalty has been awarded. Even in cases like that, you've seen that there is this constant sort of almost, if I can say, like a public lust for people to die. Yeah, so I think it is that investment and this sort of cultivated investment in retribution that is being manifested and being spearheaded through the police.
Right. I just want to circle back to the subject of demolitions for a moment. And Mrinalini, if I can
Yeah.
bring you in on this one, this one of the aspects of the demolitions has been the fact that this idea of collective punishment, people seem to be okay with it. Collective punishment for the purported illegal acts of a few. Not just saying that stones were pelted from this general area, so all houses here will be demolished, but also saying that if house A was where stones came from, one person from house A pelted stones, but everybody living in that house will be collectively punished for the alleged illegal acts of one. Does Indian law in any shape or form provide sanction for this concept of collective punishment?
Um, I think that no, according like criminal law doesn't allow for this at all. That you can go ahead and demolish, or that you can even in terms of attaching property, that still doesn't mean that the property can be harmed in any manner. There is some kind of leeway that the Supreme Court has made, taking a sumoto decision back, sumoto matter back in 2009, to say that when there is violence that occurs during a protest or during an agitation, then there has to be some kind of um, compensation that needs to be made. I still think that the idea that you can demolish as a result of this, or that you can automatically attach property, is nowhere like explicitly present in our law at all. But this pattern still has existed regardless of it being extrajudicial. Like, for example, we've curated a set of tweets looking at how this is a larger pattern starting from 2020 onwards itself. Right? So we saw that in Irani Dera, for example, a Muslim colony here in Bhopal in 2020, when the police tried to go and apprehend an accused person. Given that there was an alleged resistance to that arrest to the police comes back 10 days later, and they go ahead and demolish about 20 shops there overnight. And there is, of course, the district administration is there, a huge police force is deployed. There is a lot of violence that occurs as a result of this. So there is obviously no consideration of the fact that there are multiple residents within one house. It's not necessary that the person who's accused of a crime is the person whose name the property is, and these are all just these are not facts that actually end up mattering, right? Because it is a public spectacle of some sort that is intended to be made in this situation. I'll also ask Nikita to come and comment a little more about this collective
Nikita,
punishment.
just a moment before you, I just wanted to our viewers, if they're wondering what this 2009 Supreme Court order that Mrinalini referred to is, it was a suo motu matter that was taken up by Justice Arijit Pasayat's bench at that point. That particular case is called Destruction of Public and Private Properties versus the State of Andhra Pradesh. I'm glad Mrinalini brought it up, Nikita, because some legal commentators are speculating that this is what is forming the legal basis of the actions various state governments are taking. Is it indeed? I mean, executive action without, again, trial and conviction?
I mean, this, the Supreme Court on various occasions has always upheld the principle of saying that, you must balance the needs of society versus the needs of the rights of an individual, right? So then to be able to say that, well, it's okay for the rights of certain individuals to be compromised in the interest of larger public order or the larger good of society, because that's something that needs to be upheld. And I think you see that principle being followed in several cases. I mean, a lot of these demolitions that have happened in the past have also happened of properties of those belonging to groups of people that are considered to be habitual offenders, where you see that this sort of idea of surveillance and surveilling not just the individual who's considered to be a habitual offender, but anybody who's in association with them, right? Their family or their friends, their data being collected by the police. So I mean, we see that this sort of compromising of people's right to privacy, people's right to movement, and not just of individuals. These are collectives of people, communities of people that this has happened to historically, right? So in various ways, even though the criminal justice system, very strangely, when each time a crime is committed, it's the individual who's put on trial, but in the way that the ramifications of that happens, it's always collective. And and through all of these sort of quasi judicial proceedings and the powers that the police has, it is almost always the idea of collective punishment that is pushed forward, and the Supreme Court has upheld that in the interest of maintaining public order on various occasions. So I think this is an example of that, and now we're seeing this manifest in this way.
Right. Nikita and
I
Mrinalini, I
will
mean, sorry, Mrinalini, go ahead. You had a point to make.
I just
Yeah.
had a comment to add. I mean, while this judgment has what has formed the basis of what is the laws that have come in UP and MP and even Haryana, and some of the text of what the committee's recommendations have been adopted quite directly. There's still a distinction to be made that what they recommend is the attachment of property, and also when the compensation amount cannot be um, paid, right? It's never that directly this is how we're going to do. There is a system of default. There is, of course, and also the committee that they suggest is to be set up under the High Court. There is a retired judge of the High Court who they recommended should preside over this. None of these things we see in the laws that have actually come in. It becomes a much more executive kind of tribunal that there is. There are questions to the independence of the tribunal that will be set up also, and all of this is also coming from a problem of that we did have a law in place which was to prevent damages of public property, that there is that act, um, and the Supreme Court was actually hauling up the fact that there is no kind of proceedings that are happening under this act. But then the idea comes in that also these proceedings happen in a very political manner. They are they are carried out in very specific instances and a result of violence that is triggered either with the support of the majoritarian forces that there are, or as a result of very huge public sanction for crime control that Nikita was referring to. So then I think for us to not grapple with that as a result of the Supreme Court judgment is something we need to really reevaluate.
Right. And an indication of the intent, as you're saying, of when these laws are used became evident when, for the first time, this destruction of public property business was taken up again when the CAA protests happened across the country. But Nikita, the Criminal Justice and Police Accountability Project are doing what I believe is of vital importance, because documenting what is happening is so key. And you're not just documenting what is happening, but there is also, you're providing a sort of an analysis in this case, of the cases that have happened in Madhya Pradesh. Every time you say there is a violent incident and there is some kind of a communal conflagration, possibly, what the measures that the administration takes by demolishing houses, etc. Could you tell us a little about this project and what is it that it sort of unearths?
At the CPA project, I think the goal is to be able to look at the sort of basics of policing, right? There's a lot of, there has been a case that has been made about the police, I think, for a very long time, to say, oh, this is an institution that is violent and it's something that resorts to the excesses of power. There have been cases also that have been made for police accountability. But we've never really looked at the question of everyday policing to see, how is this discretionary power that has been at the heart of policing, how is that exercised, at whose expense is it being exercised, and for what purpose is it being exercised, right? So the sort of major aim of the Criminal Justice and Police Accountability Project is to be able to look at the police's own data, to see what are the stories that it's telling us about, against who are these FIRs registered, what kind of offences are these FIRs registered for, and what are the ways in which police power is being exercised. So we really want to be able to contextualize and delve into the discretionary power of the police to make a case to say that, well, the way that the institution is structured and the way that the institutions, everyday wheels of the institution are moving, it is designed to target and certain people belonging to certain oppressed caste communities, and to say that basically the law and order of the function of the police, where for which there has been so much public sanction, is essentially like a social order function of the police, which is to keep certain communities in check, and to say that, well, the way in which social hierarchies function, where certain Bahujan communities and Muslims are considered to be a threat to what is quote unquote the Hindu social order, is something that is maintained. And what kind of role does the police have to play in that? I mean, and when we looked at, when we started doing this work, the first thing that we did was to look at police data during the pandemic. And it became very evident to us to say that, when there is so much public sanction on, there is so much public demand to say that, well, the police needs to have more powers in order to be able to control crimes. When we actually looked at the police data, we saw that a majority of the cases that the police were arresting people for were really petty low level offenses, like two people playing cards on the road. So you see that this is the aim of in the way in which the police functions, and everyday policing moves, right? Because it's very easy for us to talk about, say, instances of custodial violences or certain instances that garner public attention, and therefore also be able to exceptionalize those instances as being aberrations. But what we're doing is talking about how everyday policing is synonymous with being violent, and being violent towards oppressed caste groups and minority groups. And I think that is the way in which the CPA project is conceptualized, and that is the attempt that we're making.
I hear you. I mean, the most egregious sort of example of police violence during the pandemic was the cases of Jairaj and Benix, the custodial torture, and the
Yeah.
death of the two men. And that, of course, and you say in the process, as you're saying, everyday violence being meted out by the police is something that doesn't get quite the same attention. Um, if I can, I know you're not sociologists, you're lawyers. Even so, I mean, given sort of your research background, I want to understand from you. Over the last few years, we have seen multiple states pass laws that appear on plain reading to be a violation of fundamental rights. I'm referring to the ironically named freedom of religion bills that we have seen, laws that became laws, of course, subsequently in multiple states. Most of them are in effect banning marriages between Hindus and Muslims. And then we have these many sort of recovery to damages of public property. Mrinalini already touched upon how It's not in consonance with what the 2009 Supreme Court order actually says in many of these states. Now, my question to the both of you, and one of you can take this, is how come this has happened? This happens, and there's not even like a perfunctory sort of opposition from either the political parties in the opposition space, even civil society. It's very muted, the opposition. This has been my reading, and the courts, more often than not, seem to take no notice at all.
Mrinalini, please go ahead.
I think there are two things I want to touch upon here. One is that we are definitely seeing a very different kind of lawmaking happening over the last few years than we have earlier. In that, even apart from these bills, they're just part of a larger picture where, for example, like the labor code or like an excise amendment that we had here, or even the farm bills that we had, they were all passed without discussion by just a voice vote, without having enough time to be able to ask questions or come prepared, or even without being referred to a parliamentary committee, which is the norm for many special bills that are thought to be introduced. So there is that difference we are seeing in how lawmaking is there. Second, I think that law has always been an instrument of power to kind of bludgeon people with, and there's not enough credit we like. There's not enough attention that we pay to that fact. These laws very much are intended to cause a chilling effect and to kind of intimidate also communities as a whole and people as a whole, right? I think why I, I think it's also that the fact that there have been many safeguards that have been in terms of opposition that have been removed in very different ways, and that criminal cases have been filed against people. We see that there is a criminalization of dissent and a stifling of dissent that is a part of the overall pattern of how we're all existing in this space right now. Nikita, would you want to add something more to this?
I think there was always a sort of criminal architecture in place that was designed to prohibit certain ways of living or criminalize certain ways of living, right? So, for instance, the Excise Act that Mrinalini was referring to, it mostly criminalizes, consumption and sale of alcohol that is consumed by Adivasi communities. We see the Wildlife Protection Act, where, the hunting of certain animals that communities have been traditionally hunting has been criminalized. Playing cards on the road, you're not going to, the police is never going to raid these fancy South Delhi Diwali card parties that happen annually, right? It's going to be two people playing cards on the basti who are going to be arrested under the Public Gambling Act. So the idea is that, there has been an entire architecture that has been put into motion, and everybody, including civil society, for a very long time has invested in this criminal architecture to say, well, we need stronger criminal laws, most prominently in the cases of sexual violence. And now, very, very evidently, particularly post 2014, the current ruling dispensation has, in very clear and blatant ways, weaponized the same architecture that always existed in the forms of, the Freedom of Religion Act or the anti-conversion laws in various ways, right? Or the cow slaughter laws. So I think it's a sort of evil that we have all invested in, which has been very tactfully and strategically been weaponized post 2014. And I think what we're seeing is an outcome of this decades long investment in the criminal justice system and criminal law as a one stop solution to all of society's problems that we're seeing manifesting now. And I think unless we're actively making a push for decriminalization and for decarceration, we are going to see this being replicated in various ways.
Right, and this is something that merits a sort of entire discussion on its own separately, and we hope to take this subject up on your weekly fix sometime ahead. Nikita, Sonavane, and Mrinalini, Ravindranath, thank you so much for having made time to speak to us here, and for sharing your insights as well.
Thank you. Thank you
Thanks
so
to our
much.
viewers. Right. Thanks to our viewers for watching as well. I'm going to leave you with some voices from Jahangirpuri in Delhi, where the Municipal Corporation of Delhi, inspired by Gujarat MP UP, carried out demolitions in a place where communal conflagration had taken place on the event of Hanuman Jayanti, and even an hour after the Supreme Court pronounced its order asking for status quo to be maintained till the case is heard, the JCBs continued to demolish houses and shops.
जी भाई साहब, आपका नाम?
मेरा नाम आशु।
अच्छा आशु जी, क्या आपकी दुकान ये जो तोड़फोड़ हुई है?
ये हाँ जी, ये मेरी जो है बाइक की शॉप है। ये देखो क्या नुकसान करा है, सारी बाइकें वगैरह तोड़ दी। इनको जो है पहले 1-2 दिन का टाइम देना चाहिए था, लेकिन इन लोगों ने कुछ भी टाइम नहीं दिया। इन लोगों के पास में सुप्रीम कोर्ट का ऑर्डर आ गया है कि ना ही तोड़ा जाए ना ही कुछ करा जाए, 1-2 दिन बाद के बाद देखा जाए। लेकिन इन लोगों ने ना ही सुन के उसके बावजूद भी ये सब तोड़फोड़ मचा दी और मस्जिद का गेट वेट फिर इन लोगों ने हाथ लगा दिया, सारा कुछ तोड़ ताड़ के अलग कर दिया।
आज सुबह आपको पता चला कि ऐसे तोड़फोड़ होने वाली है?
कुछ पता नहीं चला, कुछ भी नहीं, कि मतलब कि जिसकी दुकान या उधर से कबाड़ा वगैरह उठाएंगे न्यूज पे, तो हमने ये सुना था, इसलिए जो है अपना चुपचाप बैठे हुए थे। नहीं तो अगर हम बताते कि कुछ सामान वामान अपना निकाल लो, कुछ टाइम तो देना चाहिए आदमी को। अब ये हमारा नुकसान जो है, बाइक को जो है एक स्कूटी भी पूरी तोड़ दी है, सारा कुछ तोड़ दिया। इसका नुकसान जो है कौन भरेगा इसका?
जी, कोई नोटिस कभी आपको आया है एनसीडी से?
नहीं आया, कभी कोई नोटिस नहीं आया।
कभी आपको कोई नोटिस नहीं मिला है कि ये जो है इस तरफ है, ये गैर कानूनी है?
कोई नोटिस नहीं आया कभी।
अच्छा, और सुबह भी ले जा रहे
में गलत हुआ है। मंदिर हो चाहे मस्जिद हो, अगर उनको इन्फॉर्म करते हैं एटलीस्ट, क्या उसके छज्जे हटाए नहीं जा सकते थे? अगर इतना ही तक तो मस्जिद में घुस कर जो कार्रवाई की देखी, जिस तरीके शांतिपूर्ण तरीके से, क्या मस्जिद के हम लोग शैडो को हटवा सकते थे कि भैया आप हटा लीजिए। इससे अराजकता बढ़ती है।
जी, तो एक मैसेज दिया जा रहा था, जो मस्जिद के बाहर के शेड्स को तोड़ा जा रहा था, टीवी कैमरास उसको कैप्चर कर रहे थे। लेकिन मैं देख रही हूँ यहाँ कुछ पत्रकार खास आप पे इसलिए फोकस कर रहे हैं क्योंकि वो दिखाना चाह रहे हैं कि हिंदू परिवारों का भी नुकसान हुआ।
बिल्कुल।
लेकिन क्या आपको नहीं लग रहा कि ज्यादा ये एक तरह से मुस्लिम व्यापारियों को ज्यादा टारगेट किया जा रहा है?
मैम ये देखो, इस पूरी गली में सिर्फ मैं अकेला हिंदू हूँ, कोई हिंदू नहीं है। तो जहाँ कम्युनिटी ज्यादा होगी, नुकसान तो जाहिर सी बात उन्हीं का होगा। हिंदू जब मैं अकेला हूँ तो अकेला मेरी नुकसान की बात तो की नहीं सकती, इसलिए तो सबका ही नुकसान हुआ है। मेरा तो हुआ ही हुआ है, तो दिख ही रहा है। पर एक मेरे को जो है गलत लगी हिसाब, क्योंकि सबको ईश्वर ने दिमाग दिया है और सोचने समय शक्ति दी है। तो अगर प्रशासन चाहता, ये अनाउंस कर सकता था पहले कि कल यहाँ पे जो है बुलडोजर चलाया जाएगा, तो आप अपने सामान को हटा लीजिए, शेड हटा लीजिए। क्या इतना एक इन्फॉर्मेशन